What's going on, everyone? Griffin here, and we have removed attack penalties for your tabletop role-playing game. Let's head over and let's talk about it. So this kind of goes in tandem with the topic that we touched on last week about the warding system, and we did mention it there that there are no attack penalties, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this whole situation. So Vigor is going to be your attack modifier. Vigor accounts for how skilled your character is with weapons. This could be any weapon from a single-handed light weapon to a two-handed heavy weapon. Additionally, this includes any ranged weapons such as bows, crossbows, or even firearms. Vigor additionally accounts for generally how strong or skilled you are physically. This applies while making necessary resistance checks that would require strength, skill with weapons, or combat in general. When making an attack roll, you will roll a d20 and use the Vigor modifier for your character to achieve a total success. The same applies for a Vigor resistance check, where you will roll a d20 and use the modifier associated to achieve a total score. So for melee combat, all players will have access to martial weapons for combat. This includes spellcasters or any type of character that you're making. They will all have access to martial weapons. Each player will be allowed to attack with melee weapons and improvised weapons as long as you have the essence to do so. On your turn in Alacrity, you will determine what actions you want to perform and the amount of essence required to do so. In order to make a melee attack, you must roll a d20 and add your Vigor ability modifier to the roll. If you're rolling with favor, you must roll a d20 and the favor die associated with your current Vigor modifier and add the results together. When you are making a melee attack, you must be within range of the melee weapon to perform an attack. If you are not within melee range, you will be unable to attack with a melee weapon and must expend essence for movement to close the gap. When all players and enemies have completed their turns and the Alacrity order is reset, all essence will be reset to the original values. Please see below for a breakdown of melee combat. So, like it said before, 1d20 plus your Vigor ability modifier equals your hit value. For melee attack with favor, 1d20 plus favor die for the Vigor ability modifier equals the hit value. Now, ranged combat. Each player will be allowed to perform a ranged attack if they have a ranged weapon currently equipped. Additionally, you must have the essence required to perform the attack. On your turn in Alacrity, you will determine what actions you want to perform and the amount of essence required to do so. In order to make a ranged attack, you must roll a d20 and add your Vigor ability modifier to the roll. If you are rolling with favor, you must roll a d20 and the favor die associated with your current Vigor modifier and add the results together. When you target a creature with a ranged attack, either with a bow or a ranged spell, you must have a clear line of sight on the target. If a clear line of sight is not established, you must position yourself favorably to have a clear line of sight. When all players and enemies have completed their turns and the Alacrity order is reset, all essence will be reset to their original values. Please see below for a breakdown of range combat. So it's the same as melee combat. 1d20 plus your Vigor ability modifier equals the hit value, and the same thing with the ranged attack. With favor, you roll the favor die with the d20, and we'll go into favor a little bit more in the future. I'll make a video specifically for that. So weapons are broken down into multiple distinct variations, with each variation providing specific benefits. These variations have a grouping of weapons or weapon sets that will all perform mechanically similar to one another, so they can be flavored however you like. Weapons can be expanded upon in a multitude of ways by using mastery options or applying magical effects to them. Additionally, weapons have a set damage value for each weapon set. There will be no rolls necessary to determine damage to a creature. Lastly, feel free to work with the Oracle to give additional specific properties to a weapon. For example, if you give your character access to bolas and you want to have it restrain a creature, there will need to be a new mechanic introduced to allow this to happen. Please see the tables below for a breakdown of each weapon set. So for melee weapons represent any weapon that you hold with your hands that require you to be within a certain range of an enemy to successfully attack. This includes your fist and any improvised weapons that you acquire on the fly. Additionally, this also includes weapons that offer a player an increase of range or the ability to throw. Melee weapons will be split into a few distinct variations, such as improvised weapons and unarmed strikes, light weapons, heavy weapons, and polearms. Each variation will have a predetermined damage value associated with them, along with additional properties that can be acquired through mastery options. Below are tables that describe each of the melee weapons. If there's a weapon that you would like to use that isn't listed, please work with the orc to determine where the weapon should be placed and the properties the weapon will have. So this is similar to what we went through last week. You have improvised and unarmed strikes, 1 damage, light weapons 2 damage, heavy weapons 3 damage, polearms 1 damage, but melee up to 10 feet. Ranged weapons represent any weapon that can be used to attack an enemy at extended ranges. This includes light ranged weapons and heavy ranged weapons. To perform attacks with ranged weapons, much like melee weapons, it requires line of sight. You have the ability to attack anyone at range as long as the line of sight can be maintained on the target. Each variation will have predetermined damage value associated with them, along with additional properties that could be acquired through mastery options. Below are tables that describe how they work. So you've got light ranged weapons that do 2 damage and heavy ranged weapons that do 3 damage. So line of sight. While performing a ranged attack, you must establish a line of sight to a target enemy. This applies to ranged weapons, ranged spells, or mastery options that allow ranged attacks. Ranged attacks have no limit to distance in relation to your position, but a line of sight must be maintained to continue to attack an enemy. Anything that breaks line of sight will stop a ranged attack. This could be environmental objects, mastery options, or specialty equipment. So additionally, you have equipped weapons and readied items. So equipped weapons, as you adventure explore, you will have the ability to have 2 items equipped, 1 in each hand. This could be a weapon in one hand, a weapon in both hands, a weapon and a spellcasting focus, a spellcasting focus and an item, or a weapon and an item. In order to cast spells or to attack, you must have a weapon or spellcasting focus in one of your hands. If you are disarmed, or if you disarm another creature, they must retrieve the weapon, use an improvised weapon, or attack with an unarmed strike. Additionally, you have readied items. In addition to what is currently equipped to your character, you will also have access to 1 readied item. This item could be a weapon, item, or spellcasting focus. The purpose of having a readied item is an effort to eliminate the use of additional essence needed to search for an item that would be within reach during combat or exploration. So to determine your ability stats, and I've already got our 2 characters here set up that we are going to simulate combat with. You roll 3d6 re-rolling ones, just so everyone is aware, and there's a table that shows what the ability modifiers are specifically for whatever you roll. So technically the lowest that you can get is a 6 and the highest that you can get is an 18. That doesn't include your ability score increases that you get during character customization. This is the fighter's stat block here that we're looking at, or character sheet. The standard array that I've been kind of going with is 16, 12, and 8, which is a +3, +1, and a -1. And that way, whenever you create your character, you can add 2 to whatever you want to. So if you want to bring your judgment up to a 0, you can. If you want to raise your vigor to a 14, you can, or your fortitude to an 18, you can. This creature, this is the fighter, has 18 warding, 3 essence, and 7 HP, whereas the goblin is going to have a fortitude of 12, which is a +1, vigor of 16, which is a +3, and a judgment of 8, which is a -1, a 14 warding, 3 essence with 5 HP. Okay, so we are going to simulate a combat here. We have the fighter back, we have the goblin. The fighter is going to move up to the goblin by using 1 essence and is going to do a short sword attack on the goblin, which is going to do 2 damage to HP once the character is broken. So we're going to rolls a 20. We'll get into how crits work in the future, but for this example, we're going to say that it rolls a 20 plus the 1 on the vigor, which is going to be 21, which is definitely going to break the goblin completely and is going to reduce the default HP that it has from 5 down to 3. Since the goblin's warding is already broken, the fighter is allowed to do an additional attack without having to break their warding once again, right? So the fighter's going to do that. 3 essence, moved up with 1, attacked with 1, is going to use the additional essence that they have access to reduce the target creature's HP by 2, which brings it to a 1. So the goblin has been attacked twice, has its HP reduced from 5 down to 1, and has access to 3 essence, and is basically 5 feet within attack range with the short sword that the goblin has access to the fighter. So the goblin is going to attack the fighter. So the goblin rolled a 9 here. 9 plus 3 is going to be 12, which is going to reduce the warding of the fighter from 18 down to 6. That's 1 essence expended from the goblin. The goblin is going to attack once more. It rolled a 17, absolutely broke the armor, and it's going to do 2 damage to the fighter, which is going to reduce it down to 5. Now the goblin has to decide. The fighter's warding is broken. It can take 1 last essence to attack and bring that creature's HP down by 2, or it can do something else on its turn. Since we're not going into mastery options or anything, we're going to say that it is going to attack that creature again and is going to reduce the HP by 2, which is going to give it 3 HP. So you have a 1v1 combat encounter here. The fighter, which had started out with 7 HP, is currently down to 3 HP, and the goblin that started with 5 HP is currently down to 1 HP, and that round of combat has been concluded. There's no reason for an attack penalty to exist in a system like this, because you have access to your warding, you have access to buffing your warding with mastery options, and then you also have access to reactions, which we will go in more in depth in a future video on how reactions work. But basically, there's certain mastery options that give you reactions to where you can completely mitigate damage completely. You can redirect attacks to another individual or to another target, or you can absorb the attacks and do something crazy with it. So you may have a mastery option that allows you to absorb spells, and whenever you absorb those spells, maybe they raise your warding. But you have to roll a contest roll and use a essence off of your turn to be able to do so. So this is why attack penalties are not needed, because you have systems in place that exist within this specific system that allows you to buff yourself. It allows you to do some really cool and interesting things. And since your warding fluctuates and you have access to reactions and things like that, there's no attack penalty needed. You move up, you roll the d20, you add the vigor modifier to it, and you're ready to roll. And that completely covers that 1000%. So we're going to kind of do a simulation of range combat just so that everyone is aware. And we're going to say that the fighter has access to a short bow, and we're going to say that the goblin has access to a short bow. Now, this is the beauty of having 3 essence and having a system like this. If you move 30 feet, you can move the fighter, let's say it's their turn, right out here where it has a clear line of sight, which could be judged as not since there's, vegetation here, but we're going to say has a clear line of sight. Can attack the goblin, right? So we're going to say that it attacks the goblin with the short bow, and it rolls an 18, which does break the goblin's warding and does damage directly to the goblin. This is where the fun and more complicated parts of the system come in. So if this is a 1v1 combat, the warding for the goblin is broken and you can do damage directly to its HP. If the goblin has a 5 HP, you know for a fact that you are not going to be able to completely eliminate this creature because you're not going to be able to do enough damage. So you broke the creature with the first attack and you reduced its HP from 5 down to 3. If you attack it again, it's going to reduce it down to 1, which is going to leave you wide open. You also are aware that this creature has a bow as well. So this creature can attack you 3 times with this line of sight without having to do anything else. And sure, it has to break your warding on that first attack, but if it does, it would reduce your HP as the fighter from 7 down to 1. Whereas the goblin would be reduced down to 1 as well and be on an even playing field. So for this example, since it's a 1v1 combat, we're going to say that the fighter attacks the goblin with the bow attack, breaks the warding, does the damage to the warding, and is going to move back here behind cover. So it uses 1 essence to move up outside of cover, it uses 1 essence to attack, and then it uses its last essence to move back into cover. This is how beautiful this thing works. Now on the goblin's turn, the goblin may want to move, but based on this positioning, the goblin is going to have to move in a very interesting way to be able to maintain a line of sight, right? Because if you look at this, you have to be able to position yourself like in this area right here, or in this area right here to do line of sight, right? So basically the goblin may have to burn 2 essence to be able to get to a line of sight point to even attack the creature. So this is why there's no attack penalties needed. Once you start introducing other variables into your encounter, whereas cover, line of sight exists, and you have to maintain a line of sight to be able to attack someone, that coupled with warding and reactions and things like that, you don't need the attack penalties. You don't need to give people multiple attack penalties whatsoever. And this is one of those things where I know that a lot of systems do attack penalties. I know Pathfinder does attack penalties for multiple attacks. I know that the new DC 20 stuff does attack penalties for multiple attacks. And I understand why that those exist. I understand why they are there and mechanically why they need to be there. But I feel like that there's a better and easier way to where you can kind of skirt around penalizing your players as opposed to rewarding your players and giving your players a more fun and fulfilling experience overall. And having a system like this to where the warding exists, reaction exists, and then for ranged combat, so any ranged spells and any ranged weapons, you have to have a line of sight of that creature or of that character. You have to determine as a player how you're going to move, how you're going to position yourself correctly in order to be able to do damage to another creature. And even if you get that line of sight, you may not roll enough to be able to break their warding. You may have to expend more essence than you think to be able to get into a position to where you can maintain that line of sight. Whenever you start doing like a 4v4 combat or a 4v6 or a 4v8 where you have 4 player characters and then you have, 4, 6, or 8 enemy creatures, then things get pretty ridiculous pretty fast. And you're more so focused on keeping yourself alive and using the mastery options that you have access to, coupled with the essence that you have access to try to mitigate as much incoming damage as you can, but still giving yourself enough essence to be able to attack whenever your turn rolls around. It is a purely player decision that allows you to be as devastating within the game as you want to be. And you may take a lot of damage and you may take a lot of hits in order to do something like that. But if that is how you envision yourself and envision your character, then that is what you should roll with, and that's how you should do it. So I'm not poo-pooing on those systems once again. I'm just saying that to me, there's a better way to have combat flow a little bit more smoothly that allows all characters to be involved at one time during a combat encounter, where players aren't, unnecessarily penalized, in my opinion, where it allows them to do the things that they want to do and put themselves in positions that they want to put themselves in and be able to try to do as much as they want to on their turn. So be sure to let me know what you think in the comments down below. Are you a fan of attack penalties, especially on the DM side? I'm interested to hear what you guys say. Are you guys fans of like having, stacking penalties in your RPG system for your players whenever they try to do like multiple attacks and things like that? Or do you prefer something like this where it allows a little bit more flexibility and a little bit more player choice without the penalties, where they kind of balance everything out in the long run whenever you start adding these other systems and other variables to them? Start adding warding, you start adding reactions, you start adding more creatures to fight as opposed to a 1v1 encounter scenario, then things start getting a little bit more complicated and it makes those player decisions a little bit more impactful. Are you fans of that, or do you prefer just having the penalties on your characters? Are you a fan of that? Be sure to let me know in the comments. Also, be sure to check that description for links to Facebook, Discord, and Twitter. Those are the places to contact me. Additionally, I will put a link to the current version of the system that we are working on. It's not done by any means. It is a current work in progress. But if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out. But the link for that will be in the description down below. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I plan to continue to make videos like this explaining how this system works. So if you're interested in seeing even more interesting mechanics and different ways of approaching a tabletop role-playing game, please be sure to subscribe and check out the future videos. And thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to check back next time. Have a good one, guys.